He held the tiny test result in his shaking hands. "Is this?" he whispered. Clara nodded, her eyes brimming with quiet joy. "Yes, we're going to be 3. In that moment, in a small kitchen filled with mismatched mugs and the smell of burnt toast, the once arrogant CEO who had been mistaken for a scammer realized something. This wasn't just love. This was everything he never knew he needed. But how did they get here, from a broken job interview to a swing of a backpack at an airport to late-night talks under village stars? This is not a story about perfect people. It's a story about 2 imperfect souls who found something rare, the courage to stay. If you're ready to feel, to reflect, and to believe in unexpected love again, then stay with us. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story that might just change the way you see love. Now let's begin. The soft murmur of announcements echoed through Rosendale Airport, blending into the late afternoon hush. Clara Jensen, just past 35, stepped out of a small chocolate boutique near Gate 12. Her resume tucked under her arm, her confidence left behind at the last interview desk. Another rejection. Another gentle smile from a manager too kind to say, "You're too old for this." Clara tugged her frayed cardigan tighter and whispered, half-joking to herself, "Next stop, selling gum at baggage claim." She headed for the exit when something tugged at her attention. An older woman in her late 70s was dragging a heavy suitcase, struggling with each step. Behind her, a tall man in a buttoned shirt and dark glasses moved toward her swiftly. Too swiftly, Clara didn't think she acted. "Hey, leave her alone!" she shouted, storming forward and swinging her canvas bag straight into his back. "Ah, what?" The man stumbled, clutching his side. "What is wrong with you?" Clara stood between him and the woman. Breath quick. "I saw you reaching for her bag. Don't play dumb." The elderly woman blinked, startled. "What?" "No, dear." He asked if I needed help. The man removed his glasses slowly, brows furrowed in disbelief. "You really thought I was mugging her?" Clara stood her ground. "You fit the type. Nice clothes, sunglasses, indoors. Probably owns 5 passports." He exhaled, pulled out a silver-edged card, and held it up without a word. "Ethan Cole, President Cole, Financial Group." Clara eyed it hesitant. "Could be fake. I just got tackled by a stranger and I'm the one explaining myself," Ethan said dryly. "Do you usually attack helpful men, or am I just lucky?" Clara crossed her arms. "Only the ones who look like they stepped out of a true crime docuseries." The older woman chuckled from behind them. "You two should sit down over coffee before someone calls the news." Ethan gave a quiet laugh. "So you do think I look charming?" "That's something." Clara rolled her eyes and glanced again at the glossy business card in her hand. "Ethan Cole, President Cole Financial Group. You're really a CEO." "Search my name," he said with a smirk. "Though if there's a headline about a man assaulted at the airport, that's probably me." Her lips twitched, despite herself. "Well, I'm kind of sorry. I'll take that as a rare partial apology," he replied, slipping his sunglasses back on. "For what it's worth, this was the most entertaining moment of my week." With a lazy wave, he turned and walked away. Clara stood in place, cheeks burning with a mix of embarrassment and reluctant amusement. The next morning, Clara had already walked halfway across Rosendale, handing out resumes like lost flyers. The rest of them, creased and slightly damp, were shoved in her backpack, ignored. She dropped into a worn chair at a modest cafe near the central bus station. Her breakfast, a burnt piece of toast and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in the late 90s, did little to lift her spirits. She exhaled heavily, her head resting in her hand, trying not to cry. "Tell me," a voice said, "is that a storm cloud hovering over you, or are you just auditioning for a sad movie?" She looked up and froze. There he was, same jacket, sunglasses now dangling from his shirt, a slight smirk, and a tray with a cappuccino and a croissant. "You again?" she asked, blinking. "Not stalking. I swear," he said, setting the tray down. Just here for coffee. Didn't expect the airport Avenger to be my table neighbor. Mind if I sit? Clara simply gestured to the empty chair. He sat down, leaned forward. Job hunting again. She gave a dry laugh. You could say that. The only offer I got today was a flyer for an online baking class. He studied her. Do you know how to make coffee? If it's instant, I'm a 5-star chef. Why, Ethan took a bite of the croissant, then said, Because I need a secretary, and oddly enough I think you'd be good at it. Her eyes widened. You're kidding. We met yesterday. I literally hit you. Exactly, quick reflexes, good instincts. Bit overkill, sure, but you're not the type to freeze. That's rare. Clara eyed him suspiciously. Ethan, if that's even your real name. Google me, he said with a grin. And while you're at it, consider the offer. It's a short-term position for a social initiative. Decent pay, housing's covered, no backpacks required. She hesitated. I'll think about it. Perfect. He scribbled something on a napkin and handed it to her. That's my number. Call me tomorrow. Or drop by my office. Just leave the tactical gear at home. Clara chuckled under her breath. He might be strange. She might be losing it. But for the first time in a long while, something felt different. The next morning, the napkin with Ethan's number was still crumpled inside her bag. She hadn't slept secretary to a CEO you once attacked. Not exactly on her 5-year plan. Still, by 10 o'clock, she was back on the street handing out resumes and collecting the usual "we'll call you" smiles. Out of curiosity, she paused at a magazine stand. Her eyes skimmed the business section, and there it was, Ethan Cole, the enigmatic visionary of the decade. Same sharp jawline, no sunglasses, just certainty. And suddenly, Clara wasn't so sure he was joking. Clara's gaze landed on a business magazine tucked behind some tabloids. Her heart skipped. Ethan Cole, the billionaire who hides in plain sight. Below the headline was his face this time, polished and serious, with a subheading that read, Silent Wealth, Big Impact, Private CEO Launches Rural Education Project. She blinked. He wasn't joking. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She typed in the number from the napkin, stared at it, deleted it, sighed and went back to her usual routine. One more stop, one more resume handed out, one more rejection with a practiced smile. By midday, the sun was blistering. Her shoulders ached. Her stomach complained loudly. She ducked into the same tiny cafe from the day before. It was familiar. Cheap safe. She ordered a simple cheese roll and juice, then slumped into the same corner table, resting her forehead on her palm with a groan. Then, as if the universe had a twisted sense of humor, I'm starting to think you're the one following me now. She looked up, and there he was again. Light shirt blazer casually slung over one arm, coffee in hand, that same frustratingly smug grin. What can I say? Maybe I just really enjoy overpriced toast and inconsistent service. This place grows on you, she replied dryly, shifting so he could join her. Ethan sat like he belonged there, like they had done this every week for years. He set down his cup, took off the blazer, and leaned in just a little. So, any thoughts about the job? Which one? Clara quipped. Secretary/human shield or tropical getaway companion? He laughed. We'll save the coconuts for later. I meant the actual job. She toyed with her straw. Still feels like some sort of reality show prank. It's real. He said plainly, I'm heading to a remote village in the mountains to support a charity program. I need someone to help organize things, translation notes, logistics, just someone who isn't afraid to speak up and shows up when it matters. Clara arched an eyebrow. I speak passable English, kitchen Spanish, and tourist-level Italian. That enough better than the last person, he said with a grin. She once thought bonjour was Korean. Clara chuckled despite herself, then fell quiet. Ethan, I still don't know you. You're some guy who appeared out of nowhere, turned my week upside down, and now wants to fly me out to who knows where for a mysterious job. He met her gaze unshaken. I get it. You don't trust easy. That's a good thing. But for what it's worth, I trust you. You're gutsy. You act when others freeze. You speak up when no one else does. That's rare, she scoffed. Fantastic, I'm broke, jobless, and now apparently a vigilante. Look, he said, voice softening. This isn't a life contract, just a short assignment. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. You'll have a private room, a security team, and a real contract. Nothing shady. Just help me do something meaningful. And when we're back, you'll have experience working with a CEO on a philanthropic project. Clara studied him. And if I say yes, then what? Then in 3 days, you fly out with me to a small mountain town. I'm funding a school and a clinic. You'll help with everything from scheduling to translation. Then we come back and who knows, you might just have a new path to follow. She narrowed her eyes. This still sounds like the start of a documentary titled Missing in the Mountains. He smiled. Then I'll have the lawyers add a no kidnapping clause to your contract. She laughed. A real one this time. Maybe he was nuts. But for the first time, the idea of saying yes didn't feel quite so crazy. Is that even a real clause? Clara asked, squinting. If not, I'll make it one. Ethan replied, his tone light but sincere. Clara chewed on her bottom lip. Every logical part of her told her this was insane, but another part, the quieter, braver part, was already smiling. If I say yes, am I sleeping behind the supply closet or what? 3-star inn, private room, real bed breakfast with fresh rolls, not yesterday's toast microwaved to death, fresh rolls locally baked. I have standards, he smirked. Almost sold. She tilted her head. And if I smack you again with my bag, can we monetize it this time? I'll get a film crew and we'll split the revenue. She burst out laughing so much so that an older lady at the next table glanced over with a smile. You're not just strange, you're delightfully strange. Functional strange, he corrected, grinning. Something shifted in Clara then. For the first time, she looked at Ethan, not as some charming, offbeat stranger, but as someone who meant what he said. Someone real. I don't wear designer shoes. I mess up grammar sometimes, and I have no clue how to make coffee that doesn't come from a jar. That's exactly why I want you. His tone was steady, warm. Clara looked at the crumpled napkin between them, where he'd drawn a little doodle of a smiling sun. She reached across the table. Then congratulations, you've got yourself a secretary. Ethan clasped her hand. Welcome to the madness, Clara Jensen. A quiet moment passed before she added deadpan. If you try anything funny next time, it'll be a frying pan. Fair. I respect kitchen-based boundaries. The sky hung heavy with clouds the morning they left Rosendale. As if the weather itself sensed something was about to shift. Clara stood at the pickup spot in worn jeans, a blouse borrowed from her neighbor, and a backpack that looked like it had survived 5 storms. Her hair was pulled back, and her nerves were coiled tighter than ever. This is either brave or really, really dumb, she muttered. A sleek black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down, revealing Ethan's sunglasses on coffee in hand, looking like he'd walked out of a lifestyle magazine. Morning, Miss Jensen. Regretting everything yet? Since yesterday, she said, tossing her bag in the back seat. But if I'm going to crash and burn, might as well do it in style. The road stretched out before them, lined with trees and uncertainty. Between bursts of awkward silence, teasing began. What scares you more, getting lost in the mountains or being cut off from Wi-Fi? Ethan asked. I'm more worried you'll get on my nerves, and I'll have to throw a thermos this time. Progress. He nodded. At least now I'll get a warning. That backpack was a warning from the universe, she said, smirking. For the first time, she heard him laugh, not the sarcastic chuckle she was used to, but something softer, realer. It surprised her. The hours rolled by in a mix of banter and debates over Ethan's bizarre music playlists, which included everything from Italian opera to orchestral video game themes. This sounds like someone battling dragons on a roof, she scoffed. Exactly. It boosts morale for business calls. Sounds more like stress in audio form. You'd be surprised what closes a deal. By the time they arrived in the rural valley, Clara didn't feel like an outsider anymore. The local volunteers greeted them warmly. The project site, the school and health center in progress buzzed with purpose. Clara looked around unsure of her place in all this, but Ethan turned to her and said simply, "This is where it starts." And somehow she believed him. Rosendale greeted them like a faded postcard brought to life: dusty streets, hand-painted shutters, and children dashing between houses, their kites dancing against the overcast sky. Clara stepped out of the SUV, blinking at the colors around her. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. Ethan nodded beside her. "It is, and it's still missing what it needs." "So you're here to fix it out of pure selflessness?" she asked, skeptical. He gave a small shrug. "Let's just say my grandfather used to help places like this. I guess I'm just trying to follow the trail he left, or at least make peace with it." Clara tilted her head. "You're weird. I've been called worse." He grinned. Their temporary home was a small 2-story house on the edge of the village, cozy and worn. To Clara's relief, they had separate rooms, a detail she hadn't realized mattered until she stepped into hers and felt her shoulders drop. That night after dinner with the volunteer team, she sank onto the bed with a groan, pulling the thin blanket over her. Despite the exhaustion, she felt full. As if for the first time in a long time, she'd arrived somewhere she didn't need to rush out of. She was drifting toward sleep when a faint sound caught her ear. Footsteps uneven, breathing a pause. She sat up. Curious, she opened the door quietly and peeked into the hallway. There at the top of the stairs sat Ethan, his arms wrapped around his knees, his head bowed, his hands trembling faintly. Clara hesitated, then padded toward him, soft steps on the wooden floor. "Hey," she said gently. "You all right?" He looked up, and the usual spark in his eyes was gone. No jokes, no sharp edges, just weariness and fear. "Sometimes it just hits me," he murmured. Out of nowhere, Clara nodded and sat beside him. Legs folded. "Want water?" He shook his head. "Just stay." So she did. No questions, no pressure, just silence shared. A few minutes passed, then quietly, his voice returned. "When I was 11, my brother died. We were staying in a place like this, working with my grandfather. Something went wrong. Medicine that was expired. No doctor nearby. It all happened fast." She said nothing. The pain in his voice filled the gaps. No wonder he clung so tightly to control. No wonder he built his life around fixing what others missed. "Is that why you do all this?" Clara asked gently. He nodded. "I guess I keep hoping if I can make things right here, it'll quiet something in me." Clara leaned her shoulder against his just slightly. He didn't move away. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said, simply. Ethan turned to her. His eyes were rimmed with red, but steady. "You're kinder than you let people believe, and you're more broken than you like to admit." He smiled faintly. "Was that supposed to be a compliment? Let's call it a draw." A soft laugh passed between them. "Thanks for staying. I just figured if you fainted here, I'd be the one stuck dragging you back to bed." "So thoughtful. I try." They sat side by side, staring through the narrow hallway window at the stars scattered across the rural sky. For the first time in what felt like forever, Clara didn't feel like she was fighting to stay afloat. And Ethan. Well, for once, he didn't feel like he had to pretend. The morning came gently with a golden hue spreading across the red-tiled rooftops and tangled tree branches. Clara woke before her alarm, not startled or rushed, just rested. She lay there for a moment, soaking in the unfamiliar but comforting quiet. She had dreamed lightly of a childhood afternoon, one without worry, without weight. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of what the day would bring. Clara padded down the creaking stairs, careful not to wake anyone. In the kitchen, an older man from the local team was boiling water in a blackened kettle, humming a tune that sounded like it belonged to the mountains. She offered a small smile, received a kind nod in return, then slipped quietly out the side door. Outside, the early light bathed the hills in a silver haze. The air was cool and damp, filled with the scent of earth and eucalyptus. In the distance, children's laughter echoed faintly, while women gathered by the stream, their hands busy in water, their voices soft and steady. Clara followed the narrow trail that curved toward the hillside garden. Her first task of the day, she was to meet Mrs. Celia, the village herbalist, and help sort the day's harvest of medicinal plants for the new wellness center. But before she reached the gate, a familiar voice called out, "Early bird." She turned to find Ethan looking slightly disheveled in a blazer that had lost its battle with sleep. His smile was crooked but softer than usual. "I'm used to starting my days before the sun." "Perks of growing up broke," Clara replied, lifting an eyebrow. "Unlike CEOs who wake to Mozart and breakfast on a silver tray," he chuckled, falling into step beside her. "I haven't slept in. Not since I was 16, and Alexa still doesn't do coffee, which I consider a personal betrayal. The day she does, you people are replacing the rest of us," she teased. The trail narrowed, and Ethan kept pace with quiet ease. "Aren't you supposed to meet with the architects today? They'll manage without me for an hour," he said simply. Clara gave him a side glance. "You're acting suspiciously kind, and you're acting suspiciously suspicious." He smirked. "Just how I'm wired out in the garden, time unraveled differently, Mrs." Celia, sprightly, despite her 60s, greeted them like old friends. Her hands moved confidently over the soil as she introduced each plant with theatrical flair. "This one's the village queen," she declared, stroking a tall herb with narrow leaves. "Cures everything from headaches to heartbreaks, but only if you talk nice to her." Clara stifled a laugh. Ethan leaned in, actually taking notes, and this one he pointed to a pungent little shrub. Celia narrowed her eyes. "That one's fickle. Use too much, you'll regret it. Too little, it's useless. Just like some people." Clara turned to Ethan with a mischievous grin. "Sound familiar?" "At least I'm useful in the right dose," he shot back. But as they wandered deeper into the garden, Clara misjudged a step, catching her boot on a hidden root. She didn't fall, but her ankle twisted with a sharp jolt that stole her breath. She winced, trying to brush it off. "I'm fine," she muttered. "Sit," Ethan said firmly. No arguments. She sank onto a low stone wall as he crouched beside her, his hands careful as he inspected the swelling joint. "Not broken," he murmured, "but it's gonna hurt like hell for a while. I can walk, I know you can," he said quietly, and without another word, he lifted her into his arms. "Ethan, this is unnecessary. So is your pride. But here we are," she huffed. "You're ridiculous and you're stubborn. We're even," her heart beat just a little faster from the pain. Maybe. Or maybe from the way his voice had softened as he carried her back through the field, the morning light warming their backs. Clara didn't say another word, and Ethan, for all the silence between them, felt something settle. Not a burden, but a bond. Clara hated admitting weakness, even to herself. But her ankle throbbed with every breath, and fatigue clung to her like wet clothes. Still being carried like that, it unsettled her for reasons she didn't quite understand. She wasn't used to feeling safe, not like that. Back at the house, Ethan settled her gently on the old couch in the common room. Without saying much, he fetched a metal basin, filled it with cold water, and wrapped ice cubes in a clean kitchen towel. Then, with surprising care, he knelt down and started tending to her ankle. "You know," Clara said softly, watching his hands move with quiet precision, "you could have made a decent doctor." Ethan's gaze flicked up his expression, unreadable. "I almost did," he replied. "That's what my parents hoped. I used to hope it too. But after my brother died, I couldn't go near medicine again." She didn't speak, just waited, letting the silence hold space for his memories. "He was everything I wasn't." Ethan continued. "Calm, brilliant. He knew every first aid trick in the book. When we were working with my grandfather on a village project, he was the one everyone trusted. But that day, he paused, eyes distant. That day, there was an accident. A simple one. Some outdated meds. No one knew what to do. We lost him. And I was useless. Clara pressed the towel gently against her skin, ignoring the sting. Ethan, she said, that wasn't your fault. You were a kid. You did what you could. Everyone says that. But I've never been able to believe it. She leaned forward slightly, eyes steady. Then hear it from me. It wasn't your fault. What you're doing now. These schools, clinics, the hours you give, that's someone trying to make the world better, and that counts. He let out a soft, tired laugh. You've got this talent for saying the right thing at the most inconvenient time, and you've got a knack for showing up when no one expects you to. Their eyes met not with flirtation or even apology, but with a quiet understanding. Two people. Two messes, somehow starting to fit. Thanks for patching me up, she murmured. My turn, he replied. Next time you'll repay the favor. Just skip the backpack, no promises. They both chuckled, the kind that said more than words could, the kind that filled silence with comfort. The days that followed in Rosendale were slow and rich. Mornings were spent walking the site where the school was rising brick by brick. Afternoons they stocked medicine shelves or played translator for the arriving volunteers. At night, they'd sit on the front steps talking about everything from childhood dreams to favorite flavors of ice cream. His world had been built on contracts and control, hers on survival and resilience. Yet somehow, in the flickering porch light, it all made sense. And then came Wednesday. The sun hung heavy in the sky as the village gathered in quiet celebration. A small convoy of aid had arrived, boxes of dry food, basic meds, second-hand books, and toys for the children. Clara helped unload cartons beside a line of laughing kids, her ankle still tender but wrapped. That's when she saw Elena Ruiz, the local liaison. Usually cheerful, even mischievous today, she wore a stiff expression. Clara's eyes narrowed as Elena pulled Ethan aside beneath the acacia trees. Mr. Cole. Elena said in a low voice, "We may have a problem." Clara, cradling a box of old teddy bears, tried not to stare. She wasn't eavesdropping, just observing. It was different. From where she stood, the body language said, "Enough." Elena spoke with quick, clipped gestures. Ethan listened, arms folded, nodding occasionally, but his jaw tense. Something had shifted, and Clara felt it in her gut, the sense that the calm they'd built, fragile and fleeting, was about to be tested. Clara Ruiz, always composed and graceful, suddenly tilted her head toward Clara, giving a small, deliberate nod. Clara felt her stomach twist. From across the yard, Ethan's brow furrowed. He said something low to Clara Ruiz, but she pressed the matter, her voice steady and firm. Clara turned away, pretending to focus on sorting another box of donations, but every nerve in her body was buzzing like static. A few minutes later, Ethan appeared beside her, his face unreadable. "Can we talk for a second?" he asked. Clara wiped her hands on her jeans, forcing a casual tone. "Sure. What's up?" He led her away from the bustle down a narrow path behind the storage hut, shaded by a row of tall banana trees. The moment they were alone, he cut to the chase. "There's been a discrepancy in the donation records," he said, quietly. "Money's missing. A fair amount." Clara blinked. "Okay. And they said you were the last one to handle the supply shipment. You were alone when it came in before inventory was checked." His words were gentle, but they landed like bricks. Clara's face drained of color. "So what you think? I took it?" "No, I'm not saying that. I just—" Ethan faltered. "I had to ask. I need to be sure." That moment, something inside her cracked. All the late nights, the long walks, the shared laughter, the confessions on porch steps, all undone with a single look of doubt. "You know what's funny?" she said, her voice trembling, but her chin held high. You met me in chaos, literally hitting you with a backpack because I thought you were a thief. And you laughed. You trusted me, offered me a job, brought me here. But now, one whisper, one rumor, and suddenly I'm a suspect. Ethan opened his mouth, but the words didn't come fast enough. Clara didn't wait. She walked past him each step, louder than the last, her old backpack swinging against her hip, the same one that had started this whole story. And just like that, she was gone. The walk back into Tamarin town felt endless, without his banter, without his presence beside her. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter, another closed door, another burn. But deep down, it wasn't disappointment that hurt the most. It was betrayal. That night, Clara found a modest room above a bakery and stared at the cracked ceiling for hours. By morning, she was already hunting for a bus ticket home. Back in the village, Ethan couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at him. The math didn't add up. The pieces were crooked. Clara had been careless. He remembered the way she had moved money, avoided questions. He pulled records, checked lists, reviewed the blurry security footage, and it hit him like ice water. Elena Ruiz, the ever-smiling coordinator, had been funneling money away for months, small enough amounts not to raise alarms, always buried beneath good intentions. And when Clara got too close to the truth, too connected to the locals, she became the perfect distraction, a scapegoat. Ethan's stomach turned. He had doubted the only person who had never asked him for anything, who had stood by him on stairwells and in storms. And now she was gone. 2 days later, a roadside diner, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and second chances. Clara was tracing swirls onto a napkin with a ballpoint pen. When the bell over the door chimed, she didn't even look up. She already knew Ethan stood at the entrance. No blazer, no polished shoes. Just jeans, a t-shirt, and eyes heavy with regret. He walked to her table slowly, like every step might make her vanish. "Clara," he said, voice low. She didn't stop sketching. "Here to accuse me of stealing salt packets this time." He winced. "I came to say I was wrong." He slid into the seat across from her. It was Elena. She'd been moving money for months. "You were just in the way." Clara finally looked up. Her gaze was guarded, but her heart, oh, her heart. It was still cracked in the shape of his name. "You believed her. Not me, I did." He swallowed. "And I'll regret it for a long time." And for a brief moment, silence replaced the accusation, and what remained between them was raw and fragile, but maybe not beyond repair. "You were just the perfect shadow to hide behind," Ethan said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. Clara crossed her arms, her expression somewhere between fury and disappointment. "So, tell me, did you figure that out after an epiphany, or did someone have to hand you the truth on a silver platter?" Ethan dropped his gaze to the table. "I was blind and late, and I have no excuse. I just wanted you to know. I was wrong, so wrong." Clara wanted to scream, to throw her coffee in his lap, or maybe toss the sugar jar at his perfectly remorseful face. But instead, all she asked was, "So now what? You want me to come back and be your assistant again, like none of it happened?" He gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "I want you to come back, but not for the job. I want you to come back. Clara Jensen, the girl who once mistook me for a criminal, and still managed to teach me more about decency in 3 days than most people do in a lifetime." She bit the inside of her cheek. "And what's the salary?" she asked, trying to hide the flicker of a smile. "Double." He didn't hesitate. "Plus breakfast. Every morning I swear the toast won't be burnt." She stared at him long enough for the silence to stretch into something hopeful. "And if I feel like throwing something at you again?" He spread his arms. "Only if it's with affection or a baguette I can handle. Bread violence." Clara burst out laughing. For the first time in what felt like ages, her shoulders relaxed. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about letting go of the weight that didn't serve you anymore. And maybe some people did deserve a second shot. She stood up, swung her old backpack over her shoulder and said, "All right then, boss. But if you mess this up again, I'll bring my helmet next time." As they walked out together, Ethan knew something with absolute certainty: he couldn't afford to lose her again. Not now, not ever. The sky above Maple Street was a blanket of dull gray when Clara returned. She stood at the corner bakery she used to pass every morning, staring at the familiar sign that read, "Fresh bread from 6:00 a.m. She had woken before dawn, taken a barely warm shower in the guest house, and ironed her best shirt with a borrowed iron that had seen better decades. Another day, another search. But something felt different now. She knew what, or rather who, had changed the shape of her silence. Ethan Cole. He hadn't just walked into her life with sharp suits and smoother lies. He'd asked questions that mattered. He had listened when she talked about things as small as how to flip a pancake just right. He saw her even when she didn't want to be seen. With a sigh, Clara stepped into the bakery, bought a coffee and a plain roll, no butter. Then she hit the pavement again, backpack slung over one shoulder, folder of resumes tucked under her arm, and that old whisper looping in her mind, one more step, one more shot. She walked for hours, office doors, front desks, polite nods, and the same line over and over again: "We'll be in touch." Eventually, she sat on a stone bench in a quiet park. The cement was cold, the air thick with coming rain, but she didn't mind. She took out her phone, swiped through the gallery. Paused on one picture. Ethan had taken it, without her noticing, her arms around a giggling little girl, both covered in banana leaves and laughter. Clara shook her head. "Cheesy," she muttered, but didn't delete it. Instead, she shut off her phone and watched the world. An old man tossing crumbs to pigeons, a mother arguing on the phone while her toddler pulled on her dress, a boy trying to fly a kite in air that refused to move. Life kept going with or without her. Later that day, she wandered into a dim cafe that looked just cheap enough to fit her last few coins. She ordered a small coffee and a warm cheese roll. Then she sank into the seat by the window. Outside, the street was alive, but inside, the silence was hers. And somewhere between the sip of bitter coffee and the sound of soft jazz from a broken speaker, she wondered, what happens when you let someone back in? Would they stay? Would he? She was halfway through her lukewarm coffee when the doorbell above the cafe chimed, soft, almost hesitant, and there he was, Ethan Cole. No signature blazer, no polished shoes, just a gray t-shirt, worn jeans, and sneakers that had clearly survived more than one rainy season. He looked real human, almost like someone who didn't quite belong in a boardroom, but rather in a story that was still being written. Clara saw him before he noticed her. She considered ducking behind the menu, running, pretending she was someone else, but she didn't. He spotted her, paused, and offered the smallest of smiles, the kind you give when you're not sure if the door will slam or open. "Hey," he said, gently approaching like one might approach a scared cat. "Do you always choose cafes based on fate, or are we living inside a rom-com?" Now, she narrowed her eyes. "Coincidence maybe, but the coffee's still bad. Sit if you must." He slid into the seat slowly, like even that might be too bold. "I'm not here for the coffee." A pause. "You're back in town," she finally said, "just for a bit. Tying loose ends, maybe getting lost on purpose. Plenty of space for that here, especially if you're job hunting." "I assumed you'd have been snapped up by now." She gave a dry smile. "I'm currently being professionally ignored." Silence settled between them, soft and familiar like an old song. Then Ethan looked up. "I missed you." She didn't answer. "When you left," he continued, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "That village felt colder. I did too." Clara looked out the window, swallowing the tightness in her throat. "So you came just to say you missed me?" "Not just that." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" A map, new location, mountain region, remote complex, but full of promise. He looked at her. I want you to come with me. She raised a brow. Another mission. Not a mission. A proposal. You're proposing now. To make you my partner. Officially. Not just an assistant or a tag-along. I want you in every decision, planning, building, dreaming. She leaned back, arms crossed. Sounds like long hours and low pay. Same pay, he said. But with emotional hazard bonuses, she chuckled despite herself. Why me, Ethan? He didn't hesitate. Because you see the world in a way I don't. Because you tell me the truth. Because you make me laugh. And since you left, everything's been a little dimmer. She looked at him, searching for cracks in his certainty. There weren't any. And if I say no, I'll wait. Then I'll accidentally show up at another cafe and another, until you say yes. She smiled, a soft, amused curve of the lips. And if I say yes, then I'll bring the cheese rolls and you get to pick the soundtrack, even if it's that country pop chaos you like. Now that is commitment. They laughed together, the sound easing the last of the walls between them. Clara picked up the map, studied the lines, steep paths, dotted villages, places where hope needed roots. It's far, she said. It is. It's risky. Very. And there's no guarantee any of it will work. None. She folded the map and tucked it into her bag. So when do we leave? Ethan's grin could have lit up the whole cafe. Tomorrow if you're ready. She looked out the window again. Maybe I've been ready for a while, just didn't know it. He reached across the table, gently touched her hand. Thank you for trusting me again. She arched a brow. It's not full trust, Cole. It's monthly installments, with interest, high ones. He laughed a real laugh. The next morning, Ethan was waiting at the guest house door. No chauffeur, no luxury car, just a modest rental, a dusty backpack, and a crooked smile. Ready? He asked Clara, adjusted her sunglasses, hoisted her backpack and sighed. Never. But let's go anyway. And with that, they drove off toward the mountains, toward another unknown. But this time, they were no longer strangers chasing purpose. They were something else entirely. As the hours passed, and the car moved further from the city's clamor, the world began to soften. Towering buildings gave way to open fields, then dusty paths, and finally, emerald-covered mountains that looked like they'd been painted by hand. Clara stared out the window, her breath catching. This place, it looks like something out of a fairy tale. Ethan smiled, not at the view, but at her. Then let's call it the first page of a new chapter. Getting poetic now, are we? Blame yourself. You bring out the philosopher in me, along with my sarcasm. A dangerous mix, I know. They arrived just as the sky began to blush with dusk. The air was cool and clean, the kind that whispered peace with every breath. A small team of locals welcomed them and led the way to a modest wooden house with 2 rooms and a porch facing the setting sun. Well, Ethan asked, watching her take it all in. Clara ran her hand along the door frame, breathing in the scent of earthwood and distant waterfalls. It smells like challenge and burnt coffee. I like it. Later that evening, wrapped in blankets and holding mismatched mugs, they sat on the porch watching as stars began to blink into existence above the peaks. Clara Ethan's voice broke the silence. Why did you say yes? She paused, thoughtful. Because I got tired of running after things that only look good on paper. You're not perfect, Ethan, but you're real, and I trust real. His gaze softened, almost unsure, then, in a voice barely above the breeze, what if I told you? The project was just an excuse. She turned to him, eyebrows raised. An excuse for what? He looked at her, eyes open and unguarded for once. To be close to you. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and tucked her hand into his. Then let's make this worth the detour. And in that quiet, starlit moment, something shifted. Not a plan, not a contract, but something far rarer. a silent vow that they had stumbled onto something real, something worth keeping. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of birds and sunlight crawling through wooden shutters. For a blissful second, she forgot the world outside the bills, the rejections. Then a knock came. You awake. Only if there's coffee involved. There's hot water and some crackers. Gourmet enough. Living the dream. She rolled out of bed in sweatpants and found Ethan in the tiny kitchen wearing a hideously floral apron and stirring something suspicious in a dented pot. Should I be worried? She asked. I call it oatmeal. It smells like a campfire. Did you burn it on purpose? It's got character. Think of it as smoky nostalgia. You're a public health risk in the kitchen. He grinned and held up a spoon. Taste test. She eyed the spoon like it might explode, took a bite, winced theatrically. Tastes like childhood trauma. They laughed loudly, easily, like people who had forgotten they didn't know how to do this, whatever this was. Once they'd scraped together something vaguely edible. They walked to the construction site. A school was rising from what used to be a forgotten patch of earth. Stone wood and determination were shaping it. Clara crouched by a support beam and squinted. That left corner's uneven, heavy rain, and it'll sink like a soap opera plot. Ethan nodded. I saw it. Already called the engineer. They're double-checking everything. She gave him a teasing glance. Look at you delegating. I'm impressed. Well, after you showed me how not to use a hoe like I'm posing for a catalog. She laughed and picked up a helmet from the nearby bench. Careful, Cole. You're starting to learn. They stood together, the mountain breeze tugging at their sleeves, and for a second neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Somewhere between burned oatmeal and structural blueprints, between teasing and trust, something had taken root, and this time it was growing slowly. But steady. Guess I've learned something. Listening works better than pretending I know everything. Living with me is clearly transformative. Clara teased, her voice light. It is. My whole world's turned upside down. Ethan smiled, but it was the kind of smile that stayed behind even after it faded. Over the following days, a quiet rhythm found them. Mornings began with shared checklists and laughter over half-burnt toast. Afternoons were spent in the field coordinating construction and translating needs into actions. And evenings. Evenings were theirs. 2 chairs on the porch, 2 cups of tea, and conversations that wandered from global issues to the best way to cook rice without ruining the pot. But something else crept in, too. A gentle unease. The space between them on the porch seemed to shrink without ever moving. Their eyes lingered longer. Their words softened. And then, one rainy afternoon in the storage room, it happened. Here, hold this box. Careful, it's heavy. Clara handed him a container of medicine. Ethan reached for it, but the weight shifted. The box tumbled to the floor with a thud. In that brief second, his hand landed on hers. His other arm caught her waist. Neither of them moved, not even to breathe. Clara looked down at his hand, then up at him. Why are you still holding me? For safety. The box already fell. I know. So this is still about safety. No. Now it's impulse. She let out a short, nervous laugh. If I punch you, that's also impulse. Fair enough, I'll take my chances. He stepped closer. The space between them, gone Ethan. Her voice was a whisper. If this isn't the right time, tell me. And if it is, then I'll try not to ruin it. The kiss was soft and unpolished, tender. Not the kind of kiss that says I want you, but the kind that says I see you. When they pulled back, Clara's eyes stayed shut for just a moment longer. When she opened them, he was still there, quiet, steady, changed. Was that a mistake? No, she said, but it's definitely a problem. Why? Because now everything's different, maybe better. Do you always see the glass half full? No, but I see you. That's enough. After that, They tried to carry on as before, but it was futile. His glances were warmer, her jokes softer. The silence between them said more than words ever could, and then came the crisis. A village child arrived at the door, burning with fever, then another, then two more. The clinic was still unfinished. The doctor delayed. There was no time for hesitation. Clara stepped into action without pause. She repurposed rooms, folded blankets into makeshift beds, rationed medicine and checked vitals with trembling fingers. Ethan coordinated from the outside calls, messages tracking down emergency support. By 3 a.m, the exhaustion clung to the walls. Clara sat by one child's side, gently brushing damp curls from a sweaty forehead. Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes rimmed with worry and sleep deprivation. "How are they stable for now?" she whispered. "But that could change in hours." He nodded. "Reinforcements are on the way. A volunteer medical team, they'll be here by morning." Clara closed her eyes for a second, then stood spine-aching, heart heavier. "Until then, we keep going." Ethan reached out, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not out of comfort. Out of knowing, Clara, you're already the strongest person in this place." She looked at him, eyes glassy. For the first time since the kiss, she didn't glance away. "I'm scared, Ethan. Scared that we'll fail, that all this will crumble." He stepped closer. "If it does, we'll build it back, and I'll be here, right beside you." There was no grand confession, no dramatic embrace, just two tired souls. Two hands. And a room full of children sleeping because someone chose not to give up. And sometimes that's the kind of love that matters most. You might not get everything right, Clara, Ethan said quietly, "but you'll never fail at showing up and trying." She glanced at him, eyes tired but warm. "And what if I mess up with you?" "Then we mess up together, but I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer right away, just gave a soft nod. "Thanks." "For what?" "For staying, for seeing me. Not just the world needs you, Clara. I do too." By morning, help had arrived. Doctors, nurses, medical gear. Slowly, calm replaced the chaos. By the third day, children were laughing again, chasing each other in the yard like nothing had happened. Clara and Ethan sat in the shade of an old tree, watching them. "You know," she began, voice low, "the night everything went wrong, I almost left. I felt useless, like maybe you'd be better off without me." Ethan turned to her silent. "But then I looked at you," she went on, "running around doing everything you could, and I realized something. You were scared too, but you didn't run, and I didn't want to run either." He reached for her hand, their fingers linked, slow and sure. "Clara, I don't know where this ends, but I want to try for real." "Me too. Even if it gets messy, then we keep trying till it doesn't." They sat in silence, letting the wind speak for them. There were no grand declarations. Just a quiet agreement, whatever comes next, we face it together. Back in the city, the air felt heavier, noisy, almost too fast. The streets buzzed with car horns, blinking signs, and people in a hurry to go nowhere. Ethan gripped the steering wheel. Clara sat beside him, watching the skyline blur past. "I already miss the smell of eucalyptus," she said, "and I miss nearly burning down our kitchen trying to make breakfast," he replied with a half smile. "That wasn't breakfast," she laughed. "That was arson with oatmeal." They chuckled, but this time it wasn't just a joke, it was memory and comfort. Soon they pulled up to the towering glass headquarters of Cole & Co. Ethan exhaled. Clara looked up at the steel and glass and swallowed hard. "This place feels bigger now. Colder." "It's just a building," Ethan said, grabbing her suitcase. "You say that like it never tried to swallow you whole. If you fall in the lobby, give me a heads up, I'll bring popcorn." They walked inside, heads turned, whispers, followed Ethan Cole. The CEO was smiling, and he wasn't alone. But for once, he didn't care what anyone thought. He had returned with something more valuable than contracts and numbers: clarity. In the days that followed, Ethan moved differently. He still led meetings, still skimmed spreadsheets, but now he paused more often. He asked real questions. He actually listened. The ruthless, always right executive had learned something in the mountains. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is slow down and let someone in whispers floated through the glass corridors of coal enterprises. "Did the boss just ask how my weekend was?" one assistant murmured in disbelief. "Maybe he's got a fever." "No, he's in love." Clara pretended not to hear, but it was hard to miss. Yes, Dylan had changed, but so had she. She wasn't the girl with the crumpled resume anymore, silently begging for a chance. She carried herself differently now, with a quiet strength that came from being tested, not taught. She bore no title. Dylan said she could make one up when she was ready. For now, she simply observed, listened, and learned. One sunny afternoon, while she was sorting through a stack of reports in the small office Dylan had set up for her sunlight pooling across the floor, there was a knock. "Are you swamped?" Dylan peeked in, balancing a glass of orange juice. "Always. But I multitask. Come in." He stepped inside, sat down across from her like a nervous client, and reached into his worn backpack. "Since when do you carry one of those?" she teased, side effect of hanging out with strong-willed women who fight injustice with zippers and snacks. He replied, handing her an envelope. Inside there was a folded blueprint, soft pencil lines over white paper. She unfolded it carefully. "What is this? Something personal. A new project." Her eyes scanned the plan: community rooms, a library, a small medical office, even a greenhouse, a full social center, she asked. "In one of the underfunded neighborhoods. I found an abandoned lot there that no one's touched in years. And you want to build all this?" "I'm going to build it," he said simply. "But I don't want to do it without you." She looked up slowly, unsure if she'd heard him right. "Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a purpose," he said gently. "The job title can wait." Clara stared at the paper in her hands, then smiled. "Fine. I'll do it, but only on one condition. Name it. Stop giving me that look every time I say yes. What look like you're already writing our wedding vows in your head?" He grinned, leaned back in the chair. "And what if I am?" Clara turned away to hide the way her cheeks burned. "You were easier to deal with when you only made burned oatmeal and bad jokes, and you were more predictable when you called me a scam artist every 5 minutes. I kinda miss that version of me." "I don't," he said softly. "I like this version a lot more." That evening, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. The wind had a bite to it, but the city noise seemed far away up here. Still, the noise in her heart hadn't quieted. Not yet. Dylan found her a few minutes later. "You good just thinking?" "Need help with that?" "You help by being quiet sometimes. It's a rare gift." He leaned beside her hands, resting on the railing. "I've been thinking too," he said, eyes scanning the lights below, "about who I am when I'm not behind a desk, about what really matters." She looked at him, really looked. "And what matters?" He turned to her. His voice lost its usual rhythm, like he wasn't reciting. He was revealing that life makes more sense when you're in it. Clara took a slow breath. She wasn't a girl running from what she couldn't control anymore. She was a woman walking toward something even if she didn't know where it would lead. "This might not be perfect timing," she said, "but for the first time, I'm not afraid of what's next." Dylan smiled and reached out his hand, not like a man proposing anything, but like someone simply asking, "Stay. Then stay with me in this project, in this life, in whatever this becomes." She didn't hesitate this time. Her hand slipped into his. "I'm already here, Dylan, and I'm not going anywhere." They stood like that, fingers intertwined, gazing at the city as if its chaos couldn't touch them. But the peace didn't last. It was well past midnight when Clara sat bolt upright, startled by the steady buzz of her phone. Her heart raced. For a moment she thought she was back in the village tending to sick children. But no, this was her small apartment, the one with the creaky windows and a view of a tired parking lot, Mrs. Amelia Dillon's doorkeeper. Her name blinked across the screen. Clara answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Miss Clara, I'm so sorry for calling this late, but something's happened." "What is it?" she asked, suddenly, alert. "Mr. Dillon. He rushed out of the building not long ago. Reporters were outside shouting questions. He looked devastated. He didn't speak. Just got into his car and drove off." Clara's chest tightened. "Reporters." "Yes, talking about some old scandal. I didn't catch the details, but he looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. I thought maybe you should know." She thanked the woman and hung up. She almost called him almost, but instead, her instincts told her to search. She unlocked her phone, opened a browser, and there it was. Scandal resurfaces. CEO Ethan Cole. Under fire for alleged cover-up in failed humanitarian project. The headline felt like a punch to the chest. The article painted a grim picture. A rural health clinic funded by Cole Enterprises years ago, built with structural flaws. It spoke of medical negligence, patients harmed, one reportedly dead. Worse. There were documents, emails, signatures, claims that the company had known and stayed quiet. Clara's hands trembled. She knew this predated Dillon's time as CEO. But had he known? Had he kept it from her? She stared at her screen long after the article ended, the words burning like betrayal. The next morning, the city was buzzing with speculation. At Cole Enterprises, the air was tense. Reporters camped outside. Inside doors shut quickly. Whispers replaced small talk. Clara made her way up. Dillon's assistant looked pale. "He left before dawn," she said. "Told me to cancel everything. Didn't say where he was going." Clara stepped into his office. It felt wrong without him. There too, quiet, too clean. On his desk, an envelope, her name on the front, his handwriting. She hesitated, then opened it. "Clara, when I met you, I thought you'd be the most unpredictable part of my life, but you became my anchor. Before this storm grows louder, I need to step away, not to hide, but to protect what matters. This scandal, whether old or new, shouldn't derail the work we're doing. The community's still waiting for clean water, for safe clinics, for hope. If I stay, the noise will drown out the truth. If I leave for a while, maybe people will refocus. I couldn't face you and pretend I wasn't breaking inside, so I left this instead. I'll be back. Clara. And when I return, if you're still here, I'll tell you everything. Dillon." She read it once, then again. 4 times in total. The words were raw. They felt honest, but honesty didn't erase disappointment. Clara knew what it meant to be left behind, even if it came with a promise. In the days that followed, Dillon vanished. No emails, no texts, no word, and Clara. Well, she kept moving. The community center still needed hands, but without him, so many things didn't quite fit, like building a bridge without knowing if the other side was still there. Something wasn't right. The foundation was still being laid. The plans were on schedule. But to Clara, everything felt quietly off. There were cracks not in the walls, but in the silence he'd left behind, and she was the only one who felt them. So she went searching. Not through headlines, not through emails, but to the one person who might still know where Ethan Cole went when the world turned its back. Benjamin Cole, his grandfather. The man Clara had met once at a formal event. He had the kind of presence that didn't need loud words. Just one look from him and truth had no place to hide. She found a number. "Made a call. I'd like to speak with you. It's about Dillon." To her surprise, he agreed. They met in the back garden of an old estate, the kind with ivy-covered stone walls and silence that felt older than memory. Benjamin poured tea into porcelain cups like nothing in the world was burning down. "You've got nerve," he said without looking up. The press didn't dare knock on my door. But you came in person. I'm not here to chase headlines, Clara replied quietly. I'm here because I care about your grandson. Benjamin studied her for a long beat. Did he tell you what happened in 2015? No, he left before he could. Benjamin nodded slowly. Back then, Dylan was just an intern. He stumbled on the medical center's design flaws, raised the alarm. But the board didn't listen. They silenced him, shut the doors, brushed it under the rug. Clara's heart sank. He tried, and he failed, not by choice, by powerlessness. I stepped in later, but the damage was done. He's carried the guilt like a stone in his chest ever since. Not because he caused it, but because he couldn't stop it. Clara blinked back the sting in her eyes. Do you know where he is now? Benjamin set down his teacup. Yes. Then tell me. He shook his head. No. Why not? She asked, voice tightening. Because if you're the person he believes you are, then you already know where to look. She drove home in silence, but her mind was loud. She replayed moments, his panic attack on the stairs, the way he talked about his brother, the earth, the trees, the place where it all began. That village, the one with red clay roads, hand-built homes, and memories etched into the wind, that's where he'd be. At sunrise, Clara packed a bag, filled the tank, and took the road back to the only place that ever felt like truth. It was nearly dusk when she arrived. The sun hung low, draping the mountains in gold, and there he was. Sitting alone on the steps of the unfinished school, hair unkempt, beard growing in, and eyes distant like he was trying to remember who he was before the world asked him to be something else. She stepped out of the car, no hello, no questions, just walked toward him. He stood but didn't move. So, she said, voice breaking slightly, "This is your hiding place." He shook his head. "No, this is where I remember who I want to be." She stopped a few feet away. "I read your letter." He looked up. "And you still came." She nodded. "You should have told me sooner. I know I was scared of losing you." She took a step closer. "Dylan, we only lose what we let go of. And I'm still here. Doesn't that count for something?" His eyes softened. For the first time in days, he looked like someone coming back to life. "I still want you beside me," he said. "Even when everything falls apart." Clara reached out her voice, calm, steady. "Then stop running." And just like that, in the hush of a fading day, without any dramatic music or grand gestures, they found their way back through trust, through truth, and through the simple act of staying. "Face it with me." Dylan's voice was quiet but steady as he reached out his hand. "Can you forgive me?" Clara took it, squeezing gently. "Only if next time you decide to vanish, you take me with you." They both laughed, a shared sound of relief and rediscovered ease. He pulled her into a firm, grounding hug, one that felt like coming home after too long in the storm. The sky overhead was moody, painted with slow-moving clouds, but in her chest, something fluttered light and free. That morning, after a humble breakfast of sun-warmed bread and leftover butter, they set out with no destination in mind, just two people walking as if time had kindly agreed to pause. "You know what hit me today," Dylan said, nudging a pebble with his shoe as they wandered along the dirt road, "that your coffee-making skills are a public danger." Clara teased, eyes gleaming. I already knew that he smirked. "I meant something real." "About me." "Oh, well then go on." "This sounds serious," he exhaled. "I've spent so much of my life chasing the image, being the capable grandson, the perfect CEO, the guy who always holds things together, but with you. I don't have to be any of that. I can just be me. The regular guy with scuffed shoes and too many doubts." Clara listened quietly, her footsteps in sync with his. "I think I've realized something too," she said. "I spent so long thinking I had to earn my worth, that not having money, Not having the right degree or polished background made me less. But when we stepped into that village together, I stopped running. I realized I was already enough. Dylan stopped turning to face her admiration, softening his gaze. You're stronger than you know, Clara, and more open-hearted than you let on. Maybe that's why this works, or maybe he smiled. We just got lucky, she grinned. Lucky's fine by me. Back in the city a week later, everything moved faster, but it all felt different. Dylan returned to his office, not just as a leader, but as someone who now listened. Moore paused longer and didn't need to prove anything. And Clara. She had a desk with a view, a shiny new badge that read Social Impact Coordinator, and a coffee mug Dylan had gifted her with the title Chief of Reality. This sounds way too official. She laughed. Because you are? Dylan replied. But peace, like everything else, had its tests. One Friday evening, as they were sorting through stacks of paperwork between cups of tea and half-eaten pastries, Dylan's phone rang. He answered, then went still. That was my grandfather, he said after hanging up. He wants me in Germany. There's a high-stakes meeting with our European partners. He thinks I'm the only one who can convince them the company still deserves their trust. Clara's expression shifted from curious to cautious. Germany, she echoed. That's sudden? Dylan nodded. 4, maybe 5 days. I was hoping you'd come with me. She blinked, surprised. Me? I don't even speak German. I barely survive English in meetings. You don't have to say anything, just be there. That's enough for me. Her heart tugged, equal parts flattered and afraid. Dylan, we just got back to something that feels steady. I'm still finding my place. Going to another country right now feels fast. He stepped closer, took her hands in his. I get it. I really do. You don't need to come, but I'll go handle what needs to be handled. And when I'm back, we keep building what we started. Deal only. If you promise to come back, I swear. 2 mornings later, he was gone, and Clara stood at the window of their office watching the city breathe below, telling herself the same thing over and over. He's coming back. And this time I believe it. Their farewell at the airport wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Just a long, lingering kiss that spoke every word they didn't dare say. When Clara watched him disappear through the security gate, she felt a strange hollowness settle in her chest. It was as if part of her had flown with him across clouds and continents. The first couple of days were filled with warmth, landed freezing cold, but the pastries divine, back home it's scorching. Also, the bakery burned the bread again. Hurry back. But by day 3, the texts began to dwindle. Time zones clashed. Meetings stretched longer. The rhythm between them faltered. And by day 4, silence. Something shifted inside Clara. Then, she decided, perhaps instinctively, to revisit the village on her own. She wanted to reconnect with the people, check on the progress of the community center, and remind herself what they were building and why. On her return trip, she stopped at a quiet train station cafe in a nearby town. While waiting for her coffee, voices from the next table floated over. He's still in Europe, right? Always seen with that blonde woman from the international team. Yeah, the German director. People say they're inseparable. Clara didn't flinch, but her stomach tightened. Not from jealousy, but from doubt. That creeping familiar fear that maybe she had believed too much, trusted too quickly. That night's sleep never came. The next morning, a message pinged on her screen. Landing tomorrow. Meetings ran late. I've missed you. Her reply was simple. I'll be waiting. But she didn't say where. When Dylan returned, jet-lagged and weary, there was still a trace of the smile that always softened his sharp edges. He didn't go home. He didn't stop by the office. He went straight to the community center. There, on the floor of the gathering room, was Clara, barefoot, cross-legged, giggling as 3 children decorated her with paper flowers. She looked up, surprised, but not startled. Didn't expect you to come here first. You're always my first stop. He meant it. But something in her tone made him pause. What is it? He asked gently. She hesitated, then said softly, I missed you, and I didn't know what to do with that. He stepped closer, cautious, like he might break something if he moved too fast. I missed you too. But I'm here now. What's wrong? She looked away. I guess I'm scared of what her voice barely rose above a whisper, that this us is some dream, that one day you'll remember where you truly belong, and it's not here. Not with me, with your world of conferences and jet setting and people who speak 3 languages before breakfast. He understood completely. You heard about Petra. The German director, Clara, nodded. Dylan gave a short breath. She's married. 3 kids. She helped me prepare presentations and tried to convince me to get better sleep. That's all, I swear. If you need to hear it from her, I'll hand you the phone myself. Clara looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. It's just, I care. Maybe too much. He gently lifted her chin, eyes steady. No, Lou. You care exactly the right amount, and I care too. I just don't always know how to show it right. He stepped even closer. So let's start again. And again. As many times as it takes. She smiled, a slow, quiet thing. Just promise me one thing. Anything next trip, I'm going with you. His grin lit up the whole room. Already packed your seat next to mine. If someone had told Clara Jensen months ago that one day she'd be sitting in a boardroom, confidently explaining the impact of community programs to a room full of corporate executives, she would have laughed, or walked out the door. But today, she stood there wearing a simple white shirt, dark jeans, and a name badge that read Social Impact Coordinator, Cole Enterprises. She didn't have to prove she belonged. She knew she did. And across the room, Dylan watched her with a look that said, There's no world I'd rather belong to than the one we're building together. In the gleaming boardroom of Cole Enterprises, Clara sat at the long table, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. Next to her, Dylan sat silent but present, his posture sharp, his eyes softer than usual, especially when she spoke. We're not just putting up buildings. Clara said, her words carrying more than confidence. They carried conviction. We're creating spaces that restore dignity, places where people feel they belong, where they're seen. One of the board members, a distinguished gentleman with round spectacles and a French accent, leaned forward. This, he said, is more than strategy. This is purpose. Clara offered a modest smile, and under the table, Dylan gently reached for her hand and held it. No words needed. Later in the elevator, Clara exhaled as if she'd just run a marathon. Was I awful? You were exactly what the world needs, Dylan replied. You were you. I used to chase jobs. Dylan handing out resumes like candy, and now I'm out here quoting social philosophy to millionaires. He smiled. And look where it led you, right into a life you built with your own hands. She looked at him and whispered, And what about what we're still going to build? He didn't answer, not with words, just with a look that said everything. The next week they left the towering glass buildings behind and returned to where their story truly began, the village. The school stood proudly, laughter echoing through its halls. The health center bustled with care and warmth. It wasn't just a project anymore, it was a legacy. One quiet afternoon, Clara and Dylan hiked up the hill, the same one where months ago they'd sat in awkward silence and open vulnerability. This, Dylan said, taking in the view is where I saw the real you. Clara smirked. And it's where you made me cry. I still regret that. Good, she teased. It keeps you humble. They settled on the same worn stone where she once nursed a twisted ankle. Remember this spot, she asked. How could I forget? I nearly made it my mission to carry you everywhere. Well, these days I walk just fine, she said with a grin, but I still want someone walking beside me. Then before she could blink, Dylan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Simple, hand-carved familiar. Clara froze. Is that... He opened it. Inside was a ring, not flashy, just right. On its side, a small carved flower, the same one they'd found together in the village's garden. Her favorite. I thought about doing something grand, he began, But that's not our story, is it? We started with a misunderstanding, a flying backpack, and a whole lot of chaos. She laughed, tears already brimming. So Clara Jensen, he said, voice trembling, just slightly, will you keep building this messy, beautiful thing called love with me? She bit her lip, wiped at her eyes. Only if we use strong bricks, no shortcuts, no patches, reinforced bricks, I swear. Then yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the kiss that followed wasn't grand or orchestrated. It was honest. It was two lives sealing a future. They married months later. No ballroom, no designer gowns. Just the village, the volunteers, the people they had served. Clara wore a dress that danced in the wind. Dylan wore white linen and bare feet. The children from the school carried wildflowers, laughter, and rings in their tiny palms. When it came time for vows, Clara took a deep breath and said, "When I first met you, I thought you were a con artist. And maybe you were. Because somehow you stole my quiet, my doubts, and then my heart." The crowd laughed. Dylan laughed hardest. And as they stood together under the open sky that had watched them fall apart and find each other again, there was only one truth left between them. Some stories don't begin perfectly, but the ones worth living, they always find their way home. "I thought you were a total disaster when I met you," Dylan said during his vows, his eyes never leaving Clara's. "And you were absolutely right," she replied with a teasing smile. "But I was also brave. And somehow in all my chaos, you found your home." Their kiss drew warm applause. Flower petals fluttered in the air like confetti made of blessings, and the faces around them glowed with joy, not just because of the union they were witnessing, but because they had seen what it took to get there. It wasn't a glamorous wedding. There was no grand hall, no luxury menu, no gold-trimmed invitations. Just string lights swaying between old trees, music that made people dance barefoot in the grass, and love real and raw threaded through every moment. Later that night, as laughter and music faded into the background, Dylan and Clara slipped away from the celebration. Hand in hand, they climbed the hill overlooking the village, the same place where everything had quietly begun. Breathless at the top, Dylan turned to her with that familiar, crooked grin. "You know," he said, "I still can't believe I married the girl who tried to tackle me with a backpack at the airport. And I still can't believe I married the CEO who thought empathy was a marketing strategy." She replied, giggling, "Hey, I was just unpolished." "You were a wreck," she corrected. "A charming one, but a wreck nonetheless." She laughed again, the sound full of freedom, the kind of laugh that only comes when you've been through enough storms to appreciate the stillness. That day in the cafe, she added, her voice softening. "I was done. Not just with the job hunt, with everything I'd stopped believing that people like you actually existed." Dylan reached for her hands. "That same day, someone told me I was a great investor, but a terrible human being, that I couldn't connect with people, couldn't feel what mattered, and then you appeared, loud, blunt, beautiful. You were everything I didn't know I needed." She leaned her head against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and now he said quietly, "I want it all. The chaos. The nights we barely sleep, the wins and losses, but only if it's with you." In the days after the wedding, they didn't escape to a luxury honeymoon. Instead, they returned to their work, diving headfirst into community projects, education plans, supply distribution, and long, quiet evenings on their porch. They were building something greater than comfort. They were building purpose. Then one evening, Clara waited in the kitchen, her fingers playing nervously with the edge of an envelope. Dylan walked in tired from a long day, but still smiling the way he always did when he saw her. "Hey, love," he said. "You look serious. What's going on?" Clara handed him the envelope without a word. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning the text. Then they widened. "Is this?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "We're going to be 3. Dylan didn't speak at first. He just walked over, wrapped his arms around her, and buried his face into her shoulder. I didn't think my heart had any more space, he whispered. But it's overflowing now. I'm scared, she confessed softly. Me too, he said. But the kind of fear that tells you you're about to live your greatest adventure. They stood there for a long time, no big words, just breathing, holding, becoming a family before anything else had even begun. Clara's pregnancy wasn't glamorous. There were no filters, no weekly photo shoots, no curated updates, just small, beautiful moments like the look on Dylan's face during every ultrasound or the way he'd talk to her belly late at night, as if their daughter could already hear him. You've got the bravest mom in the world, he'd whisper, and your dad. Well, he's trying. And in those quiet moments, they didn't just prepare for a baby. They kept building hope, a future, and a life that had started in the most unexpected way, but had turned into something deeply, fiercely real. Do you know your dad used to be an uptight, tie-wearing, always-on-his-phone CEO before you showed up? Clara would say gently, rocking her belly. She doesn't need to know all that. Dylan would reply with a grin. She does. She needs to know that you changed and that she's about to change both of us all over again. When they found out the baby was a girl, Clara didn't hesitate. Let's name her Clara. Dylan tried it out. Like it was a new word, Clara, he repeated. Sounds like sunlight. Exactly, Clara said. Clara was the name of the sky we saw the day we forgave each other. Clara is the courage it took to stay. Clara is every part of you I learned to love. In the final week of her pregnancy, Clara made an unusual request. I want her to be born in the village. I don't know why. I just feel like she belongs there. Dylan didn't question it. He simply said, then that's where we'll go. He arranged everything. Spoke with the doctors. Prepared. The old house, made sure the village midwife was available and packed every item Clara might need. On the way there, as the road turned from pavement to dust, he held her hand. It's going to be okay, he whispered. Even if I scream. Especially if you scream. That's how I'll know we're doing this right. Clara arrived on a quiet, golden morning. The windows were open, sunlight spilled onto the floor, and the scent of damp grass floated in the air. Clara wept. Dylan wept. Even the midwife got misty-eyed. When Dylan held his daughter for the first time, his hands shook with awe. Hi, little one, he whispered, his voice cracking. It's me, the guy your mom thought was a criminal the day we met. But the truth is, I was just waiting for you. Clara didn't open her eyes. She didn't need to. Somehow it felt like she heard him anyway. Clara watched from the bed, tears still drying on her cheeks. You're going to be a good father, she whispered. Only because you're showing me how, he replied. He sat beside her, rested his forehead against hers, and for a few still eternal seconds, they just breathed. We made this, Clara murmured. Every piece of it. From the chaos, from the heartbreak, we built this together. The months that followed were as raw and beautiful as only new parenthood could be. Diaper blowouts 3 a.m., lullabies, midnight crying fits, and a kind of love that wrapped around all of it like a blanket. Dylan, the once impeccable executive, now knew how to swaddle with precision. Clara, the girl who once walked the city with a worn-out resume and heavy heart, had become a woman who trusted herself more than any expert on parenting blogs. And Clara, she was laughter and light and little fists curled around their fingers. She had Dylan's calm eyes and Clara's fire, a perfect in-between. She's going to be just like you. Dylan would say, God help us, Clara would joke, but yes, stubborn brave. Hours one evening. As the sun dropped behind the hills, they sat on the porch of their village house. Clara dozed in Dylan's arms, and Clara rested her head on his shoulder. Do you remember the day you told me you were a mistake? She asked, her voice barely a breath. He smiled softly. Yeah. I said I was the wrong turn. That somehow made sense. You weren't a mistake, she said. You were the plot twist, and you were the grace I didn't know I needed. She kissed his cheek. I love you, Dylan. I love you, Clara. And I love everything we've built, especially the messy parts, because that's how you know who stays. They looked down at Clara, her tiny chest rising and falling asleep in a world that at least for now felt safe. Her world was made of a mother who found her worth through love and a father who discovered love when he finally let go of control. And between an airport, a misunderstanding, a swinging backpack, and 1,000 tiny moments stitched together by choice, 3 imperfect people had found the perfect life, a family, a beginning, and this time, the kind that lasts. And so what began with a misunderstanding at an airport and a swing of a backpack turned into something no one could have predicted. Not a fairy tale, not perfection, but a life. A real, raw, imperfect, and beautiful life built one moment at a time. Maybe that's why their story stayed with you, because deep down, we all want to be seen. To be chosen not for the image we show the world, but for the messy, honest truth of who we are. Dylan and Clara were never about grand gestures or picture-perfect endings. They were about healing, about staying when things got hard, about laughing when it didn't make sense, about building something lasting from broken pieces, and maybe their story reminds us of what's still possible, that love can grow in the most unlikely places, that beginnings can rise from endings, that someone somewhere might already be holding the piece we didn't know we were missing. So now we turn it over to you. What did you feel while listening to Dylan and Clara's journey? Which moment touched you the most? And if life ever gives you a story as unpredictable as theirs, will you be brave enough to live it? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear what stayed with you. And if this story moved your heart, if it made you smile or brought you a little closer to hope, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Turn on the notifications so you won't miss the next story that just might find you at the right time, because sometimes all it takes is a single moment to change everything, from a misunderstanding at an airport to building a family under the stars. Dylan and Clara's story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come disguised as mistakes, that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence, about showing up, about staying, especially when things get messy. It's the kind of love that grows slowly, honestly, that finds you when you least expect it and stays when you need it most. If their journey touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video to show your love. Share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that go beyond the surface and speak straight to the heart. Turn on the notification bell, because the next story might just be the one you were meant to hear. Thank you for watching. And remember, the best love stories aren't written, they're lived.